Hello and welcome to the Urban Survivor channel, and in this video we're going to be doing a variety of torture tests on a bunch of different EDC and tactical lights from some of the most popular brands in the world to see whether or not they can withstand exposure to the elements as well as a variety of impacts in an attempt to recreate the types of mishaps that might occur on a daily basis, as well as some more extreme tests designed to push these lights to their limits to see which brand makes the toughest flashlights in the world. The lights we've got for this test are the Army Tech Prime C2 Pro, the Ace Beam P15 Defender, the Olight Baton 3 Pro, the Nightcore MH12 SE, the ThruNite BSS V5, the Sofern SE31 Pro, the Workos TS22, the Nextorch P83, the Woobin D1, and the Convoy S3. But before we dive in and attempt to destroy many hundreds of dollars worth of flashlights, smash the like button and let me know in the comments which brand you think will hold up the best to these tests. To kick things off, we're going to do a freezing test, and to do this we're going to turn the lights on to their lowest output setting, and this will help us determine a few different things, including how well these lights can handle being submerged in water, which is an important benchmark that every flashlight should be able to meet. And since it's going to take several hours for the water to freeze, we'll see whether or not these lights can handle submersion for an extended period of time, which will provide a much better indication of their water resistant capabilities. Also, since these flashlights are going to be freezing, we'll see if they can operate in freezing temperatures, which might be more relevant to those of you who live in colder climates. Alright, so now that these lights have been frozen, we're going to thaw this brick of ice out and take a look at each one to make sure they're all still working. And the first light that I picked up here is the ThruNite BSS V5. And it does look like this light is off, and I did try to push the buttons to get it started, but it's just not working. So we're going to let it dry out for a few hours and come back and see if we can get it to turn back on. But it looks like all the rest of the lights remained on and also seem to be completely operational, which is a great sign. Alright, so I did want to give the ThruNite light some time to dry out, so I gave it a few hours, and unfortunately it's still not working, so at this point we're going to pull it from the competition. And I'm sorry to see ThruNite tapping out so soon, but that's the way it goes sometimes. Next, we're going to push these lights towards the opposite end of the temperature scales by heating things up, and we're going to be turning these lights on and submerging them in super hot water, and again we'll be putting their submersion capabilities to the test, and we're also going to be exploring the temperature ranges at which these lights can operate, and also seeing if being exposed to these high temperatures causes them to shut off, or worst case if there are any catastrophic failures. These temperatures should be far greater than anything your light should experience on a day-to-day basis and should recreate a worst-case heating scenario, so it'll be interesting to see how these lights react. And right off the bat I started to notice some bubbling and a lot of motion in the water. And now that the lights have been submerged, we're going to take a quick temperature check, and we're at 173.6 degrees Fahrenheit, and we're going to leave them in here for about 5 minutes. And now that the lights have had some time to heat up, we're going to take them out of the hot water, and as you can see, these lights are nice and toasty, coming in right around 145.7 degrees. Next, we're going to pour some cooler water on them, which is going to be somewhat of a shock, and then we're going to be taking a look at these lights, and so far everything looks good. But I did notice that the Nextorch light has quite a bit of water inside the lens, which is not a great sign, especially since they went through all the trouble of building a twist-style USB charging input, so I'm not sure where all this water is getting in, but it is a bit concerning. And another light that also picked up some water beneath the lens was the Sofern SE31 Pro, but at the moment it's working, so we will move both of these lights through to the next round. But the good news is that all of the remaining lights held up really well and had no visible moisture inside their lenses. Now we're going to transition to an impact test, and we're going to start with a 2-meter drop, and this height should replicate most drops that might occur on a daily basis. And we're going to be dropping these lights on their bezels, which will give us an idea of whether or not their bezels will dent or their lenses will crack. And many of the lights do have stainless steel bezels, but there are a few that don't, so it'll be interesting to see how they hold up and whether or not steel bezels really do make a big difference on protecting the light from impact. Alright, so the light that immediately caught my eye was the Nextorch, and as soon as it dropped, the bezel popped off, and we can see this section with the auxiliary red and blue emitters, which was made of plastic, has failed. So it really does seem like a poor design choice to have the plastic components right next to the strike bezel, and since the light is not going to be something that anyone would want to carry around with no bezel, we're going to have to disqualify it. The Nightcore took the bash in the bezel like a champ, and there's just a small indentation here, but overall the light remains fully functional. I can't even find a scratch on the Olight, so I'm really impressed with how well this one is holding up so far. The functionality of the Sofern light is starting to improve, and even though you can see some water in the beam, it is regaining its functionality, so I am hopeful that as the day goes on it will continue to work, but it's definitely right on the border of being disqualified. But it did take the bash on the bezel pretty well, and there's a very minor scratch there. The Ace Beam also performed really well, and there's just the tiniest bit of scratching on the bezel. Army Tech also crushed this test, and there's no visible damage on the bezel. The small lights seem to be holding up really well, and again with the Woobin, there's no visible mark on the light. Looks like the Workhos is also in perfect working condition with no scratch, and this is one of the heavier lights here, which makes this even more impressive. Finally, we have the Convoy light, and this guy also passed with flying colors. Now we're going to heat things up even more, and for this test we're going to be taking the batteries out and lining the lights up, drenching them in lighter fluid and lighting them on fire. This test is going to be particularly interesting for the lights that have any rubber on them, including their switches and charging port covers, so we'll see if those melt or get any damage. And I'm also worried about those that have TIR lenses made of plastic, which might also melt. So this little experiment should be a lot of fun and will help us get a better gauge of the general build quality of these lights and what might happen if they do get exposed to extreme heat. Now that they've had some time to cool off, we're going to put their battery back in and do a quick inspection of each light. And even though all of the rubber components on the bodies of these lights did catch fire, they all held up really well. And there was no visible damage from this test on any of these lights, and all of the rubber held up well, which was very impressive. And even though there's still some water in the Sofran light, it has actually settled down and the UI has become surprisingly more reliable. Next, we're going to perform a drive over test, and basically we're going to just drive over each light one at a time and see if they can handle the extreme weight and pressure of a vehicle. And we're going to be performing the drive over in my Toyota 4Runner, and having your flashlight driven over is somewhat of an unlikely scenario, but it is going to really put the build quality of these lights to the test, as well as the abrasion and scratch resistance of their bodies. So we're going to go one at a time and then check in at the end and then take a look at the damages. Alright, so let's check out the Army Tech, and it seems to be working just fine, and no surprise, this light held up great, and it looks like there's just a small scratch or two on each side of the button. The Convoy also turns on and the tube is in excellent shape, and all I can see is just a few very tiny scratches in the knurling on the tube. The ace beam works just fine and the body is still in great shape, and I really can't even find a scratch here, which is an excellent sign. The O light is still functioning and it too is in great shape, and all I noticed from the drive over was a few small scratches that seem to run the length of the tube. The Workhos is still in great shape and there's just a few small scratches on the tube, but overall it held up pretty well. The Night Core is also working, and the 4Runner did have a bit more trouble driving over this one, and as a result the body did get a bit more scratched up, but there was nothing too serious. Alright, so it's officially time to pull the plug on the Sofran light, and it seems as though the water has finally gotten the better of it and it's no longer turning on. It did hold up well to the drive over, and it looks like the only damage was done to the pocket clip, which is pretty bent out of shape. Finally, the Woobin turns on and it functions as it should, and this guy is just a little scratched up, but again it's nothing too bad. Alright, so now we're going to ramp things up with a massive drop test. So it's time to make a little visit to the local mall, and we're going to be dropping these lights from the top floor of a parking structure, which is about 50 feet high, which is well over 15 meters, which is a much greater impact than any of these lights are rated for, and they're going to be landing directly on a concrete surface. This drop should be a great barometer of how well these lights are really built and how much impact they can really handle, but there should be a nice bash on each one, and it'll be really interesting to see the results. Alright, so let's dive in and take a look at these lights, starting with the Workhos. And the great news is that the light is functional, but if we take a closer look, we can see the impact from the drop was right next to the bezel, which did cause a nice indentation, which caused the lens to crack. This light was the heaviest light in the running at this point, so I knew a drop like this was not going to be kind, but overall, for a budget-friendly brand, I was really impressed and would not hesitate to recommend them in the future. The Army Tech light is functional, and the point of impact was pretty tough to find, but it appears as though it landed on the side of the bezel, and there's just a really small scratch here, which is very impressive. And Army Tech is definitely a brand I would highly recommend, and they're living up really well to their reputation of having an exceptional build quality. And this is one of my most used EDC lights, and I do carry these in my store, which is linked to down below, and I'll leave a coupon for 10% off as well. Alright, so next up we have the Night Core, and unfortunately this light is not turning on, and it looks like the point of impact was the tail, right next to the switch, but it doesn't look too bad. I am a little surprised and disappointed that it's not working considering how well the body did hold up, and I did try another battery but it still didn't work. Anyways, Night Core did perform well in the other tests, and they're definitely another brand that I like quite a bit, but I would definitely refrain from exposing this light to any extreme impacts in the future. Next up we have the Ace Beam, and so far things are looking really good, and this light is turning on, and upon closer inspection I noticed a nice big indentation in the bezel, as well as some by the magnetic charging port hookup, but overall it did hold up really well. And Ace Beam is also living up to their reputation for having a great build quality, and this is another light that I do carry in my store, and another one of my all-time favorite EDC lights. Time to check out the Woobin, and this one is also functional, and the point of impact was really tough to find on this light. and there's just some minor scratching by the bezel and on the tail. So it did handle the test really well, and if you're looking for another budget-friendly, reliable brand, Woobin is another great option to consider. Next up we have the Olight, and it also turned on and is working just fine. And this one handled the drop really well, and there's just a small scratch here on the head and on the tail. And a lot of people do give Olight crap for their build quality and reliability, but it did hold up really well in a variety of scenarios where many other brands failed. So I've got to go ahead and give Olight a big thumbs up here. Finally, we have the Convoy, and this light is fully functional, so let's take a closer look. And overall, the light looks really clean, and the only marks that I found are on the tail, which are very minimal. And based on this, it's definitely one of the better performers here, and considering this light is about $20, it's an incredible deal, and I'm very impressed by how well it held up. Anyways, this video was a lot of fun to make, and I want to thank you guys for watching, and if you enjoyed it, be sure to smash the like button and comment down below. And if you want to pick up any of these lights, there's links down in the description. And if you have any thoughts for new torture tests you'd like to see in the future, let me know down in the comments.